14 years. On a farm surrounded by woods, nearest town. There was no neighbor to talk to. No one knocking on the door asking for a favor. There was only her, the silence, and a soft hum coming from the back of the yard. Thousands of bees at work. Before we continue this incredible story, enjoy real stories about ordinary people facing life alone and building something out of. Dona Rosa's farm. She was 72. This story truly gained momentum, but everything began long before that. Back when her husband was still alive, it was he who brought the first 2 beehives onto the property. From a friend who also worked with beekeeping over near the Jequitinhonha Valley. Or went near the hives. Anyone would be. The idea of thousands of insects living so close to home. And left the bees to be, with no rush at all for it to end. Her grown children lived far away, in big cities and their own problems, and they called from time to time to sell the place and move closer to them into a easier to manage. Always answered the same way. Her husband's footsteps still held his scent scattered across the yard, and she was not ready to leave all of that behind. Enjoying this story so far, hit the like button on this video. It helps the channel grow and brings this story to more.
Had an idea she would later describe as pure madness.
Would learn to care for the bees on her own.
Not because she needed the money, although the money,
like letting a piece of her husband that still remained there fade away too. How, at 68 years old, having never once touched a hive, Rosa bought a used beekeeping suit. With age, about the behavior of bees. Because the borrowed suit did not fit her body properly.
Please, promise me you'll stop.
I understand your worry, but this is my life now. I cannot... Stubborn as she had always been, had already buried a husband. Was not about to let a handful of stings decide the rest of her life. On the other side of the ridge. About an hour down a dirt road, heard about the stubborn widow trying to manage the bees on her own.
He showed up one Saturday morning, unannounced.
Started, Rosa. See the smoke?
Yes, I have it now. Thank you.
When a colony was agitated and needed space.
Don't forget to leave a comment below about what you think of this story so far.
As the months went by, Rosa stopped being afraid and started feeling respect instead. And that most of the problems she had at the beginning came from her own nervous far away. Little by little, she began to move calmly, almost as if slowly dancing around the hives, creased, until they nearly disappeared. Bees like routine just as much as people do. She could gauge the temperature simply by how the wind felt on her skin, coming just from watching the bees' behavior at the hive entrance. A powerful storm, the kind that only happens once in a great while. Entire colonies that night, and spent days unable to sleep properly. All of it was a sign that she should really give up and go live in the city. They had always asked. But it was precisely in that moment of deepest weakness that she continued.
Every week, we bring you stories like this.
Remained after the storm, Rosa managed, within a few years. She came to recognize each colony almost as if they were different families, each with its own personality. During orange blossom season, October morning, when the orange blossoms were at their peak. Rosa remembers the sweet scent that took over the entire, that seemed to float in the warm air of that time of year. cried that day, in a different way than the other times she had cried alone on the farm. She kept a little of that first honey, which still sits on the living room shelf to this day, next to an old photo of her husband, of everything she had lived through to get there. Moment on, Rosa's honey began gaining a reputation in the region. Who used to come to the farm to buy eggs.
Told their friends, Dona Rosa. Look at all these new orders.
It seems my bees are very busy.
He did not own a car, nor the courage to drive alone down the dirt road into town.
I want to hear from every single one of you, and I promise I read all of them.
Of comments. As Rosa's isolated farm stopped being a place of loneliness and became a place of purpose. In rare conversations with visitors, she would say that the bees had given her back a reason to wake up early. She said each hive was, in a way, a silent companion that filled the void that once seemed impossible to fill. The work routine also brought benefits she had not expected. And felt less of the joint pain she used to complain about so often. Like a moving meditation, forcing the mind to stay present. She also began studying the subject more, buying used books whenever she went into town. The vibrant purples and yellows this time of day. It's fascinating. By on the hottest days is crucial. It's a small act that sustains the entire.
Keeping the colony healthy is early detection. You have to look closely at the brood pattern to spot the foul brood before it's.
Without ever planning to, Rosa became a true expert, even without any formal diploma.
All the difference in ensuring stories holds the warmth of the sun, just like the stories we carry.
I will remember that, Dona Rosa. Thank you.
Today, many years after that first hive, abandoned by her husband, Rosa runs a small honey production that now exceeds 50 hives scattered across the property. She no longer works entirely alone. One of her grandsons, captivated by his grandmother's story.
Should I look for the queen?
But on ordinary days, in the
should never be a reason to give up on starting over. Without fast internet, without expensive courses,
this far, congratulations, because you just watched a true story about courage.
People we would never imagine capable of so much.
Tuned, because next week there is another story just like this one.
All over again.
Story Rosa loves to tell visitors.
An entire swarm decided to abandon one of the hives.
Door. Anyone from the outside would have run away.
It was one of the moments that gave her the most pride, because it showed, in practice, everything she had learned on her own, just by observing and testing year after year. Rosa's relationship with the town also changed over time.
Little by little, she became a kind of known figure at the local market.
The isolated farm, always arriving right on time. Teaching her grandson became, over time, one of the most beautiful parts of this story.
At first, the boy only came to the farm
take a sting here and there, and learn at his own pace, exactly the way she had done.
Identify when a colony is sick, and promises.
Whenever someone asks, he says that he will keep taking care of this place when his grandmother no longer can.
If there is one message Dona Rosa would like to leave for anyone watching this video,
Especially for those also facing life alone.
worry now. Everything will be all right in the end. Just take a deep breath and look at the sunset.
And that the secret to this entire journey was simply to keep going, even after the stings.
Even on the days when loneliness felt too big to fit inside her chest. Our light really shows the quality. We harvest the honey right here, keeping it pure and natural, just the way the bees. A big hug.